Hello. Today we're going to be looking at how to support your EAA ambassadors and how to create a supportive working environment for employees. Hosting the webinar today, it's me, Vicky Robinson, the Operational Support Manager, and Linda, I'll let you introduce yourself.
So I'm Linda Lewis and I deliver the EAA Ambassador Training.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, so the first part of the webinar is aimed at you as a manager, and it's about how to support the employees that have been on the training with us. So they'll have done the training, they'll have come away armed with our support resources, our workbook, our signposting booklet, and this is about how you can really help them to look after their own well-being and do as good a job as possible in the role of support ambassador.
Right, thanks very much, Vicky. Well, as you can see on here, I've got a slide. We've called it the top tips on how to support your employers against abuse ambassadors. And it is a role that's quite unique, and it requires an infrastructure around the ambassador role to ensure that they're taken care of, as well as the wider workforce. So here's some of the kind of strategies that we would recommend. And as you can see there, the first one is to set up a management and peer support system for them. Now, I'm sure you already have an infrastructure where you have line management support for your employees. But it is important to make sure that they do get access to that. It's quite a unique role in that they're there to provide confidential support to the wider employees, and that puts them in a difficult situation because the only time they should be really directly speaking about an individual and sharing their details is if they've got a safeguarding concern. So what they need then is some kind of support from you as employers to listen to how they're coping with their work, learning new things as well. You might have identified some new learning for your organisation, especially about things you could change in the future to make it more employee friendly, but also a peer support system. Having more than one ambassador within an employer's environment can be really useful because each of them can support each other. They can ask questions, they can share situations they've got, trying to identify good practice and ethical practice in responding to any concerns. So obviously there's an option.
I've noticed, Linda, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Vicky.
I've noticed now at this point in the training, so we're getting on for having delivered it for about a year, aren't we? That companies are starting to send more people. So they've obviously had the ambassador in place for a few months, and it's becoming apparent that it would be helpful to have an extra 1 or 2 people.
Oh, that's excellent. I'm really pleased about that, Vicky, because I can see it's a lot for one individual to take on that mantle, and there's a lot to consider. And I think it's good to have people in various roles and various departments as well who've got that kind of understanding, would be best person to deal with the situation. During the training, we do encourage the ambassadors to take on board the fact that they need to look after themselves, and by that I mean by they can go away, consider situations they've dealt with or are currently dealing with, and identify, you know, what they're doing well with that, but also where they might need further support. And using reflective practice also encourages them to think about themselves too. And often people don't ever think about that. They're so concerned about the individual who is experiencing some form of abuse, but not recognizing that actually the person listening to this could be impacted themselves. Supporting the ambassador to develop resilience, and that's usually done through experience and also through training and awareness. And I know many agencies do offer their own in-house training on building resilience. Debrief sessions are an excellent way for ambassadors to be able to really discuss and unpick some of the issues that they might be dealing with and trying to work out what is the best way to support this individual. But also it's a great way of unburdening yourself. You know, if you've heard a particularly difficult or challenging situation, it can be impactful, and it's wonderful to have the ear of another colleague where they can have a debrief about what happened and so on.
I think with this being like an extra role as well, being the ambassador, the temptation is often to go, right, I've done that, let's get on with my day job. And doing debriefs in particular and encouraging that reflective practice sort of acknowledges the importance of this role they're doing, and makes them take that time to reflect on it and check in with themselves and how they're feeling. It recognises that it is a stressful and important role, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When you think about the debrief sessions, usually in sectors where there's counselling and what have you, there's usually access to a clinical supervisor, which is an option. But the debrief can be amongst peers. And again, just having additional ambassadors where they can do a debrief from time to time. So it won't be every single time they're going to need to debrief. I'm sure much of the inquiries they receive will be quite routine. You know, have you got a telephone number, a website, or an address? It might just be somebody coming who's talking about another colleague, because not all people will disclose to an EA ambassador. Some people will just disclose to a close colleague at work. And if that is the case, the ambassador is there for any employee who is directly or indirectly supporting somebody who's experienced some form of abuse. We can't forget the use of your own internal employee assistance programs. You'll know what they are better than we will. So not to forget that they can be excellent forms of support for staff like ambassadors. And of course, in order to appreciate and value your employees, especially the ambassadors too, doing this additional work, having proper policies and processes in place that basically outlines all of what we've just been talking about now can be really useful. And it's a reminder to ambassadors that they are not alone. And we need to make sure they feel that they're not forgotten, they're not lost, and there are people there who will keep an eye and support them. I will take us through to the next slide because I mentioned earlier about self-care. Please feel free to share this widely within your agency, because I think this is brilliant for all employees in terms of recognising that we do live in very challenging times. A lot of people are very stressed out with personal matters, economic or financial concerns. We live in a very unstable world, and I'm sure everybody would agree that at the moment. I think it's important that employers can really pass this knowledge on, this awareness around self-care. When you've got people who are self-caring, you're going to build a much more resilient and proactive workforce without doubt. They're not going to neglect themselves. They're not going to let themselves get burnt out, which we often see. So having self-care strategies is a really important measure to incorporate into your workplace practices. And this is just a slide here with some ideas. Please feel free to use them or use your own. If you forget the strategies, look at the three levels on the left-hand side there, the three life balances we should all apply. And that is having that balance between giving and getting with the people we support and work with, a balance between the stress and calm in our lives and our home lives, and a balance between our working life and our home life too. I don't know if Vicky, you've got anything further to add?
Just to emphasize what you've already said, really, these can be used for everyone. Work is stressful, life is stressful, and for all of us at some point, isn't it? So it's keeping hold of that, knowing where we are, like we keep saying, checking in with ourselves and using these techniques to hopefully make sure that we don't develop burnout or vicarious trauma. They're relevant for everyone, and they're worth incorporating into whatever mechanisms you've got in place. So your line management discussions, your debriefs, your informal check-ins every Friday afternoon. Just worth spending a few minutes on this, I think.
Yeah, really good advice. Thanks for that.
Okay, so for the second part of the webinar, we're going to look at how you can create a supportive working environment for your whole team, really. Whatever their role, whatever they're going through, whatever they've got on, there's a benefit to looking at your staff well-being, to looking at the environment you've got in place. These days, loads of people work from home. There's a lot of hybrid working going on. So it's really important to make sure that there's something in place for everyone, I think, wherever they work. It's difficult to get that cohesion now, but it's something that's worth putting effort into, and you'll really see the benefits for your team.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vicky. I'm going to now talk about a psychosocial safety climate. It is a bit to get your head around or your tongue around when we're talking about this. So for ease of reminding yourself of it, just call it a PSC environment. Psychologists have learned about the importance of creating an environment in all workplaces which feels safe and welcoming to employees. A PSC environment is a shared belief where workers can have a sense that their employers care about them. A psychological health and safety environment, one that's protected and supported by everyone within an organisation, from the top down and from the bottom up. So this isn't an environment where only managers are responsible. This is an environment where every single person within an organisation is responsible for developing that environment, for changing a culture in some cases to ensure it feels safe. So this PSC environment, it's promoted by a number of different practices and policies that you put into place, and it's one where you are prioritising all employees' safety as their well-being. It's about making sure it looks welcoming, the environment, when people come in, where they're not compromised through the day and not stressed out. Studies have found that a favourable environment where a psychosocial safety climate is absolutely endorsed, it does associate with much lower rates of absenteeism and a lower turnover of staff. So it's really useful for retention of your workforce, which is quite expensive when people move through and move on. You'll get far more favourable results where people feel this is a good environment to work in. I feel my employer cares about me and I'm going to stay here. Okay, so we've got some really useful ideas which will support this. We're going to look first of all then, what is the benefits of having these supportive workplaces? Well, how long have you got? Because there's lots of benefits. In fact, there's far more benefits than any cons to doing this. It is a really useful way to keep people happy in their work, and especially those people who might be struggling with personal issues and yet fear the idea of disclosing it to their employer because it might have a culture that feels that it's seen as weak, or they're taking up work time. So employment and economic survival then, as we can see, is incredibly important, especially during these turbulent times. And it can be particularly challenging for any employees who are trying to escape domestic abuse. So as an employer taking part within this programme, you being able to give, for example, paid leave from work at short notice or where necessary, no notice, can be very crucial for survivors of domestic abuse. And let me just give you some examples. When somebody's trying to flee domestic abuse, some people may have to engage with the police, actually report their situation. They might need to take the odd hour off or a couple of hours to attend meetings with the police. They might need to get a prevention order set up, and they might need to attend court to do that. And often these things are done at very late notice. So having an employer who is caring and understanding and supportive can make such a difference to an individual worrying about their job. Your staff are going to feel respected and listened to and certainly supported to be able to get the help they need. It also shows your interest in their welfare. I can't say enough about the investment in their well-being and what that can lead to in terms of certainly loyalty. And sometimes people always think it's about the money, but I can tell you now, some people get quite good salaries and yet will not stay with an employer if there isn't that PSC environment. They just think the money is not worth it. So think about all the additional benefits you can apply there where you will get that loyalty. I also find 9 times out of 10, people who are going through this, they will give back more in the long term. So If we move on to the next slide then, when we look at the workplace, what can you do if you have an employee who is struggling with quite a challenging abuser? Well, for example, we got on there, you can alert your reception and security staff if you feel there is a risk of the abuser turning up in the workplace. My personal experience as a manager, I had a very serious incident where one of my employees ended up being put in prison for his obsession over a young female employee. And we ended up, as an employer, organising a prevention order to stop him coming within so far of the building. We ended up having to dismiss him. And when we got the prevention order, he still breached it. So let me be clear, some abusers, not all, some will not care that there is even a prevention order, and it can put not just the employee at risk, but other employees who might be managing areas like security or reception. So again, it's speaking with the ambassadors, setting up systems where you can alert the relevant necessary staff, remember private and confidential, but making sure they're aware and knowing what to do should that situation arise. Also making sure that anybody who is being abused have arrangements for getting safely to and from home. So things like making sure the employee's got a safety alarm that they can use. But there are many apps out there now for domestic abuse victims where they can have immediate alerts to the police and such like. So again, speak to your ambassadors. They've got access to this knowledge. You can set up some strategies to make sure that employees are aware that they can do things themselves that will protect them. And of course, just simple things, asking them, especially those that are in public view where the abuser could be stalking them, ensuring that they're not visible, so moving them so that they're out of sight from the street or any potential abuser. And of course, again, being amenable to the idea of, where possible, temporary changes in specific duties. So if somebody, perhaps let's just throw up the scenario, it could be a member of the reception team who's being abused. It might be putting them outside of the reception area where they can work in another room, so they don't have to sit there and being worried about the abuser turning up. And of course, the obvious one there, if you do have any employees who carry out lone work, and it's important that during that time they are not alone, try to identify ways that they either work with somebody else or perhaps go on to other duties until the problem's been sorted.
I think just as well for all of these, it's not necessarily about you as a manager working on your own, making all these decisions. Work with the employee, let them take the lead. See what they're comfortable with, what they want to have in place. They might not want much intervention. They might, in many cases, not be that comfortable talking about what's going on, but let them make suggestions about what can be put in place. You can work with them, say, yeah, we could do that, or we could make this little change here, and let them have a say in it as well. So you might, in some cases, you might know all the details of someone's case, which will make it easier for you. In other cases, you might not know much. You might just know there's something going on, something's happening, and it's about working with that information you've got and doing the best. And the same for communicating to other members of staff as well. You don't have to share someone's details with the whole team. You just have to let them know that if someone asks for blah blah blah, this is what we say now, or this is where this person works now. It can be done discreetly. It can be done without making a big hoo-ha about everything, and without making that employee feel more awkward than they might already. Okay, so some more tips then. So in some cases, you might have a copy of an existing court order against the abuser. So if someone's got a restraining order, for example, or anything like that, have that to hand, have a photograph, so that everyone knows who this person is and knows that they are not allowed in, or they are not allowed that contact. Now, with that one, you've got the law on your side, that they are not coming in, they are not speaking to this person. You can really help by keeping a record of any incidents of abuse. That might include persistent telephone calls, emails, someone rocking up and demanding to see someone, because these might be offences in their own right as well. So you can report them as an employer, and that is obviously supporting the employee as well. Reviewing contents of the employee's personal information. So they might have new bank details, they might have a new address, they might change their next of kin. That's an important one. They might not want a next of kin or an emergency contact in some cases, and I think you need to respect that and know that there is a reason for it. Anything to add to that, Linda?
Yeah, I was just going to say with that employees next of kin information, I think it's to just be aware in some situations there has been circumstances where the abuser may, for example, be, let's just say, a husband who rings in and tries to get through to HR, making up the idea that they've lost their wife's telephone number, so could you just pass it on? Now, I know under data protection, most agencies would never do that anyway, but in some situations, especially smaller agencies, they've just passed it on, not realizing that actually they've now put that individual at further risk, because unbeknown to them, they don't want that information shared because it does put them at further risk. So do think about it. But where the employee is not happy about giving details of next of kin, I would certainly be asking for details of, I don't know, their general practitioner in case anything untoward does happen. So you have got a point of contact of somebody who knows this individual and has a medical history that might be able to support them in the event that a crisis happens at work or during the working day. And the other thing, of course, is to always be aware of your other staff as well, and that risk that this individual could pose in those very rare circumstances that it does happen. And I was reading some research recently, and we know that the vast majority of these cases of abuse happen against women and girls, and the vast majority of abusers are men and boys. Research year on year has always followed that. But not to forget, men too can be experiencing some form of an abuse. Some stats had recently been published where something like over 600,000 men in England and Wales had reported stalking. And so think about all the different protective characteristics that can be an issue and render people vulnerable, and do make sure you cater to everybody. Right.
Just thinking, Linda, sorry.
Yeah, go
Another
ahead.
situation might be where both the employee and the perpetrator work for your company as well,
Yeah.
which you just adds extra complications, I suppose, into the mix. But
Yeah.
that does happen as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Many people have had very happy long-term relationships with their colleagues that, you know, that they've met through their work. And that's not a problem at all. The problem usually happens when the relationship turns sour and they, you know, they part ways, or one individual finds it difficult to part ways with the other employee. What I would add on that, if you get any issues, again, think about your policies, because you've got more power really there, because if you've got another employee who is deemed to be an abuser, then you can adopt your own policies around harassment of staff, and you should obviously do an investigation, especially because they shouldn't be using work time to harass their colleagues, and certainly ex-partners or current partners. So you can certainly implement that. But in worst case scenarios, you yourself can, of course, contact the police where you think this is becoming very concerning. So the last slide there, don't forget the use of your own existing policies to allow the employee to be able to change work patterns or their workload, allow more flexible working arrangements where possible. Where practical as well, do offer any temporary or permanent changes of their workplace. So a really good strategy there is you can, especially in these times, like Vicky said earlier, of hybrid working, you could have a situation where somebody is asked to work from home, and yet may be really struggling with that because the abuser's there. They might be living under the same roof, and it stifles an employee's ability to be able to open up and get some help. And of course, abusers will use that situation as a way of controlling the employee. So where you've got situations like that, think again about how we could tackle it, having a system where employees can contact you in a way that they're not traceable at home, have new passwords, have an intranet system where they can send a message and so on. But it might be worthwhile offering them an opportunity to come into work and making the emphasis to the employee that they can tell their partner they have been told they have to work from the office, because it's not made out that they've initiated that, but it does help them to escape their abuser whilst they're trying to deal with the issue. The other part of that is agree what they are going to tell other colleagues. How should they respond also if the abuser does ring in or visits the workplace? It is important we give autonomy to the individual. Remember, we are offering a confidential service. You know, the ambassador can talk to people confidentially and help them with this issue, but they might not want the rest of their team, the rest of the department knowing about their personal lives. So it's literally about agreeing with individuals what they're happy to share, what they're not happy to share. You could decide to just go back to the rest of the team and say that there are personal circumstances going on which are not there for the wider team to be aware of. It's private, but just to know that for the interim, this individual's not going to be working their usual hours or their usual patterns and so on. And that's all they do need to know, nothing more. So think about how you could do that. Again, talk to the ambassadors, work out a framework that fits well for everybody concerned. Look at the technology you've got there about your calls coming through. Again, there's numerous cases where abusers use the business telephone numbers going through reception to suggest that they put me through to extension so and so, and they are actually an abuser. So again, think about some of the strategies you can put in place there to prevent an abuser getting through to members of staff who are suffering with abuse.
I was just going to say, we've already done a webinar on policies and procedures, but having all this in an official policy and procedure, you can have a specific domestic abuse policy. It just makes it easier for everyone if these issues do arise. You know, it makes it easy for you to know what to do as an employer, and it makes it easier and less awkward, I guess, for the employee to approach you to ask to put these things in place. So it fits into the psychosocial safety climate stuff. It's about being transparent. It's about that ethos of communication and support.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really helpful.
So for anyone who hasn't enrolled on this yet, who hasn't sent an employee on this yet, go onto our website, www.thesurvivorstrust.org, and we've got a whole page that tells you everything you need to know about it. But on that page, you can book directly onto a session. So just to remind you, it's 2 3-hour training sessions and then a follow-up support and supervision session. Your employee will get a handbook full of advice and guidance. They'll get a signposting booklet. They'll get various resources. They'll get a copy of the slides, and they'll get that ongoing support as well. So it's really well worth doing. And we're going to be organising for early next year where we can get everyone together and find out how they're doing, offering peer support, letting them ask any follow-up questions as well. So we're trying to really emphasise that ongoing support side of it.
Absolutely, and thanks for that. And don't forget the all important, it's free. So there's there's no cost to the employer other, of course, than their time to attend the training. So please do get in touch. And so we've got the final slide because we are talking about a difficult subject matter. We do appreciate that everybody and anybody can experience some of these issues. And so it's all about mental health. We want to just finish off reminding you of some contacts there that might be helpful. Those ambassadors who come on the training do get a signposting booklet. There is a whole host of agencies, specialist agencies that you can tap into if you need further information.
Okay, thanks very much, Linda. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Vicky. Bye, everyone. Thank